Normally when you create a macro, it goes to the default template on the C drive. If you want to save macros to another file, you need to prepare either a macro enabled document or a macro enabled template. And I recommend doing a macro enabled template because you will never accidentally write over your template with something that you don't want there. It always opens in a new document. So we're going to make a macro enabled template right now. So I'm going to make one by going to Home, the Home tab, and because normally we use no spacing and we use serif font, I'm going to go to Times New Roman 12. So that means anytime we create something now using this template, it would be in Times New Roman 12 with no spacing. So this is all I want right now in my template, just that it's no spacing and it's Times New Roman 12. So I'm going to save this by going to the Office button, go to Save As. I'm going to save it to my desktop, and I'm going to call it I'll just call it macro instruction, so that we know that's what it's from. And we're going to save it as Word document, going to there, and we're going to go to Word macro enabled template. So this is what we're going to need. Give it a name like any other file name, but save it as a Word macro enabled template. So I'm going to save that now. Because I'm now going to record some macros, I need to have this document open. So you need to see macro instruction or whatever you called your template up here at the top. Okay? Because we're going to save the macros that we create to this template. So I'm going to go to Developer tab. I'm going to check security first and just make sure. Is it this? Yes, it is. If it were not, you would click here and say OK. Now to record the macro, we're going to click right here. And here's the Record Macro dialog box. If you look on page 795, it says to call it XXXIND01. Well, you would be putting your initials where it says XXX. And then it's IND01. And we're going to take it off the hard drive and we're going to save it to our template, which is this one here in my case. And the description, I'm just going to type my initials there just so that if I printed this, I would know that this is mine. And it says to put in the description indent text 0.5 inch and hang indent text. And I'm getting this from the red text in letter D toward the bottom of 795. So the critical thing is here, when you name the macro, be sure there is no space in the name. Make sure you're saving it where you want, and if you want it to be on a template, the template has to be the active file before you start the process. So I'm going to click OK. When your mouse becomes like a pointer with a cassette tape attached to it, this is letting you know, hey, I am recording a macro. So in this particular case, what we're doing is we're making a macro that will set up left indent for our paragraphs, and then having any leftover line being hanging indent of 1/2 inch. So we would either go in the Home tab or the page layout. Either one has the paragraph launch, so let's go on that. We're going to go to left indent, and we can just go up to 0.5 and go to special and say hanging, and click OK. And we are now done with this macro, so we can end it by either going back to developer and say stop recording, or we could go down here and click, and that would also stop it. If you were doing this on the hard drive, just merely stopping the recording would save it to the C drive. But what I'm going to be doing here is saving it to this template. So I'm going to click Save. Okay. Now the next one we're going to do is in letter C on page 796. So I'm going to record another macro. This one's going to have a left indent of 1 inch and a hanging indent of 1/2 inch. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my macro on. I'm going to record the macro, and it's going to be your initials, IND 02. We're going to record it to the template. And this one, if you put your initials, and this is going to be, I'm copying the red on 796 there on letter D, indent, text, 1 inch, and hang indent, text. So this description is just to remind you what the macro is about. It doesn't make the macro work. So notice there's no space up here. I'm telling it where I want it to save, and I'm giving it a description, and I'm going to click OK. So we're going to need to go back to the paragraph dialog box. Again, we can either go to page layout or home in order to get this. So I'm going to I'll just drag across this and type a 1. And even though this says hanging already, it might not from where we start from, so we always need to click here. So we're actually making a choice during the macro, and click OK. And then we're done with this macro, so we're going to turn it off. Remember, you can also turn it off down here. Now, turning it off only saves it when you're on the C drive. Other than that, you're going to have to just save it to the template. When you look at page 797, there's one more macro to do. And so let's go ahead and do this one. This one is called Format 1, where you're changing the top, the left, and the right margins. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to Developer if I wish, or remember I can go right down here and click, and this will bring up Record Macro, and this is going to be your initials, Format 1, and we're going to tell it where to save, and put your initials just so if you print it you'll know it's you. And I'm typing what's in red at the top of 797, so it's change top, left, and right margin measurements. And I'm going to click OK. And it didn't like that name, so I'm going to go back and try this again for some reason. So let's go into Create. It's going to be XXX Format 1. Maybe I typed a space in there and didn't notice it. So I'm going to go in here, do this, type my description over again in red. Okay, so I'm going to click OK. Okay, so that was good. And now it says to change the top margin to 1.5. So I'm going to be in the Page Layout tab. So I'm going to be on that. I'm going to go to Margins, Custom, and the top margin is going to be 1.5, and the left margin will be 1.25. The right margin will be 1.25, and I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to end the macro by just clicking here, and I'm going to save. So I have to save these macros to my document, to my template. At this point though, I want to make my template go back to what it was originally. So I'm going to go to paragraph, and I'm going to make the left one 0. The right one is already 0. I'm going to make hanging go to none. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to go to margins, and I'm going to make it 1 inch all around, which is the default. Click OK. Okay, so now my template is going to be clean, and I'm going to save it. And let's just take a look and see if the macros are there. If I go to developer, if I go to macro, if I go down here and tell it to look on that template, here are my 3 macros. So I'm going to close and get out of that. So I'm going to save this. I'm going to close this. And now I'm going to use this template. So I'm going to go to use this template. I'm going to go to this button. I'm going to say new, and it's going on templates, new from existing. Mine was on the desktop. And let's see, I called it macro practice. So I'm going to look for that document. Macro instruction is what I called it. So I'm going to click on that and say create new. Okay, now this says document 2, and so if it doesn't say document 2 on yours, as long as it says document and a number, you're good. I'm going to be working on page 798 right now, where it tells you to open a document. Well, we can't just open a document because our macros are not on the C drive like they are in the book models. They're actually on our template. So we have we're using our template, and now we have to go to insert, object, text from file, and this file that we're going to open up is on the R drive. It's under our class, spring 2011, and it's going down to the macros folder. There's a document called macros survey, so we're going to open that up, double click, and here it is. Now what it tells us to do is it tells us to run the macro called format 1. So I'm going to developer, I'm going to macros, and I'm going to run format 1, and when I do, it should change the top margin and the left and right. So if you kind of look in the background, it actually changed your top margin and it changed your left and right margins. Then it says to go to the items that have numbers in front of them and run the IND01. So if I position myself here and I run the IND1, watch what it does to that one. See how it did a left indent on the number and then a hanging indent here? Now we can do the same thing here. We can just go to where we want it to run, click on macros, click here, say run, and it'll do it. Or you can do like this. We can select this one, hold the control key down, select the next numbered item, while the control key is still down, and see how I've selected all three of those items. Now I can go to macros, IND1, and run it, and all of them were changed at the same time. Then it says to go to the ones that have the lowercase letters and run the IND2. So I'm positioning myself up here, going to macros, IND2, and run. And do you see how it brought it over? A 1 inch, because it had a 1 inch indent. So I can keep doing this. I can go one at a time where I want it to run and do it. Or I can select these, I drag through these, and I'm just going to make my zoom a little smaller here. Okay, I can actually hold my control key down now, and I can go down and grab these, and grab these, and grab these, and grab these, and then run IND2. And you see how I did all of those at once they were selected. Okay, and so if you were working on 798, it would tell you to save this as C31 exercise 4. I'm looking at step 1 at the top of 798. Okay, so if I go File, Save As, and I'll just save it to the desktop for right now, and I would call it C31EX04, and it's a regular Word document, and we're going to save it. And then you would send it to the printer, and you would have that part of your homework done. So I'm just going to close this document. And remember, if I want to use my template again for something else, I would have to go into the Office button, New from Existing, and I would have to go back to find that macro again. Macros always have yellow on them, and when they're macro enabled template, it's got an exclamation mark and the yellow ribbon. So here's my macro instruction. I can either double click or click once and click down here. Again, it takes me into another clean document. When I go to developer, they're there. Okay? And that concludes this video.